All power to the people. All power to the people.
All power to the people.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out, including Chief Koval. Thank you for hosting the forum. We appreciate that. I just want to say, before I lead to my question, I think there's some misunderstanding and misconfusion about policing, because you guys are making it sound all fluffy and nice. Like, oh, the police are awesome. They come in our neighborhoods and they do all these positive things. But there's a lot of people who live in a different reality than a lot of us. When we drive a certain car, or we have titles behind us, or we live in the mayor, work in the mayor's office, we have a different experience just by default with police officers, or we have certain education, we have different experience with police officers just by default. So I just want to say, when we have an arrest rate of 8 to 1, that is directly reflected by our officers' discretion. You guys have a lot of discretion to determine who you're going to arrest, what you're going to arrest them for, and how you're going to arrest them. And black people, brown people, again, is arrested at a rate to 8 to 1. So who is responsible for that? Who's accountable for that? Who is going to be held accountable for that? We cannot address the racial disparities by adding police to our neighborhoods. It'd be nice to have a police officer that everybody know and can develop a relationship, but when you have over-policing, I'm going to say that, over-policing of a neighborhood, you increase the likelihood that someone looking like me will be arrested, profiled, harassed. I live on the south side. I've been living over here for about 6-7 years now. Favorite neighborhood, so many black, brown, yellow people in this neighborhood. Diversity rocks. I'm not leaving this neighborhood. Now, one time I have ever felt unsafe. I've never felt like someone's going to shoot me, rape me, kill me, rob me, none of that. There are isolated incidents anywhere. White people shoot each other. They do. And we don't see you adding police to their neighborhoods. So the question really becomes, how do we get equity in policing? And why is it that we as a society, as a city, as a community, have accepted the normacy that is okay to place more officers in people of color neighborhoods? Now, I understand that we would like to develop relationships, but there is a disconnect between policing and a relationship. You treat us and talk to us at us like we're nothing. You assume that everyone's gang involved and related because they sag their pants, because they wear dreads, because there's a guy here, my guy, he's here with red dreads. You would never think that this brother is an activist. When you see him or your police pull him over, you assume that he's gang related. He got red tips, red jacket. He fits your description of what a gang person will look like. So my question is to you, how do you address not just the conditioned bias of our society, but the rawness of our reality, which is most white people and most people working in systems are conditioned to think less of us and to assume that we are inferior, which leads to arrest at an 8 to 1. And I just want to say that no training, no checkbox training is going to deal with the psyche that comes along with being white or being in control or in power in your uniform. It just doesn't happen. You are innately conditioned to think of us, and that's not by your fault. It's not a personal thing. This is a structural, systematic thing. So unless we give power to our neighborhoods and communities, we will still suffer at the hands of your system. And again, this isn't personal. We're asking that power be put back into our communities, that our communities are held accountable, that we're allowed to self-determine, that we set up neighborhood watch and advocates and hood ambassadors. Did you hear me? Hood ambassadors. We do not need you to do a job that we can do for ourselves. You give us the resource and opportunity, we can get it done. Thank you.
Not there.
Wow.
All right. Passion's there, and that's perfectly all right. With that 8 to 1 ratio, reflective actually going back to the chronicled racial disparities report that serves as a crowning beacon for all of us, including the police, to reflect on what all of our roles are with respect to the infrastructure that has led to this sort of terrible statistical compilation. My suggestion, though, is that when we look at where policing is occurring, where these adverse contacts, the most consequential contacts, typically are between 17 to 26-year-olds. Okay? When we look at those places where 17 to 26-year-olds, predominantly those folks of color, we don't see that the neighborhoods make the top 10. They don't even make the top 25. I had the numbers run from January 1st through August 31st of this last year. The reason I stopped at the school year is because Jennifer Cheatham, the school superintendent, is now creating a new paradigm, the BEP program, the Behavioral Education Plan, which has even less involvement of our officers in a formalistic way. So I didn't want to jaundice those figures with the new school year and her opportunity to roll out a new program. So when we looked at this, we saw the top 10 places where folks are arrested, the 17 to 26-year-old category, is frankly Easttown and Westtown Mall, okay, the east and west transfer points, exactly, and the 4 high schools, and the east and far west Walmarts, not the neighborhood. And I can tell you that out of those top 10, although I would love most people to have the sense or impression, because most people feel good about us being sort of omnipotent and everywhere, the fact of the matter is, in those top 10 spots, the likelihood of our officers stumbling upon a crime in progress on site proactively are negligible. Most of the instances of those incidents are called in by a bus driver, the principal, a vendor, someone in the food court, a host of people, but it's a third-party initiated call to 911. Then, once we arrive, yes, in fact, then we have to find, is there an articulable basis based on specific facts that reach a legal threshold of probable cause if we're talking about a criminal arrest? And if in fact that's unsupported by those facts, then we can't make the arrest. You can't draft that citation. It won't flow, it'll be just dismissed. What I'm suggesting is that when we looked at those same individuals, looked at the face of those citations, and in fact looked at the covers of the booking logs, we can make attribution to something that you did suggest. When we look at those folks, we see that they are predominantly living in our most challenged neighborhoods. So I'm not dismissive of the fact that there can be an impression made that folks who are living in the neighborhoods, our challenged neighborhoods, are being over-policed, but it's not happening in the context of in the neighborhoods. In the neighborhoods, you have neighborhood officers who work 6 days a week, and they have an 8-hour shift, and then they are supplemented only by patrol and by perhaps an initiative by one of the community policing teams. We're just not there in the sort of abundance that is suggested. Let me just ask if you can just tell me, from the standpoint of a typical night, how many cops are on the south side working from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.? For the whole south side? 4.
Everybody's speaking.
Okay, let's do it from 3 to 11 right now while we're living. How many cops are on right now, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m.? Do you have a roster? What do you think?
No, but it's about 7 and 7.
7? Okay, because this is our highest time of day. Usually 2 to 10, 3 to 11.
And describe our South District boundaries go all the way out to the Speedway,
West High.
Hospitals, Glenway Golf Course, down Monroe Street, in on Region, everything south of Region, all the way over to Winona, all the way down to the Beltline and Fitchburg. So we have a pretty large geographic area that South District encompasses.
And quite frankly, because it's a large area and there's a lot of calls for service throughout the city, probably at any given time, you'll find that we're being dispatched or doing on-site things for an incident of domestic violence. That usually ties up 2 officers. I'm looking at Captain Roman. There may be an issue dealing with a mental health person that has some sort of an episodic breakdown of sorts. That's going to take 2 officers. And if we count the fact that they go on an involuntary commitment order, then they have to be conveyed all the way to Oshkosh and back. So that's a 5-hour round trip. So there's a lot of variables that, frankly, if I had double the workforce I have, good luck with that in a budget like mine. But if I did have that luxury, we still couldn't possibly field enough officers to deal with the volume of calls for service that you're seeing. We just can't be in every place at all the time. To your other issue though, we do have to pony up to the fact that we have a role. And I think you made a mention of it, the training. The state requires 520 hours. We do over 800. And a lot of that is dealing with issues that frankly aren't on the grid for the state of Wisconsin peace officer certification. We're doing unconscious bias training. We're doing training with crisis intervention techniques that also deal with professional communication. We're always trying to infuse cultural competency issues, bringing in people from the community. And at the end of the day, I think that we're also open to enlarging that curriculum. For the last 3 years when I was in training, we had a professor from UW Law School come in and talk to our officers for 4 hours about Project Innocence and all those people that have been wrongfully convicted, sent to prison, and many of that was on the strength of misidentification and how did the police play a role in that in terms of being unduly suggestive and how those lineups were arranged. So we do want to be sensitive to that, but I'd also say that Madison's issue, I hope we all understand, I think we can all agree, go way beyond the pale of what the police are or aren't doing. We are a tale of two cities increasingly, the haves and the have-nots, and that dichotomy is becoming increasingly pronounced. And so when you put together sort of the perfect storm elements of abject poverty, and couple that with, quite frankly, an educational system that is failing a lot of our youth, more joblessness, more hopelessness, more helplessness, that creates issues, and it also creates habitability and geographic density. People are all migrating to those neighborhoods where they can find housing that they can afford, and we're putting people stacked upon people in some areas that are target rich for them problems. So we will continue to identify those rogues that may be wearing a Madison police officer who aren't worthy of it, and we'll run them right out of Dodge. But I'd also say that we're also going to have to look at what are those things that we do systemically that may unwittingly contribute to a de facto sense of what you've alleged. And I can't dispute it. We have to look at those. We have to look at alternatives to the default mechanism of ticket or arrest. I couldn't agree more with that.